Hi guys, Dogre here with a new video, and this video will be a huge update video towards Classic Fresh. We have confirmation that we get dual spec and the removal of debuff and buff limits, which is two big things, like bigger than you would think, and also instant mail between characters on the same account. First and foremost, thank you Reddit, thank you to everyone that has filled polls about dual spec. Thank you to everyone that has pushed towards it. They have seen it. Thank you for very much the lively discussion, and dual specs is confirmed. It is going to be enabled at a later date. I will speculate it will be coming probably once MC is going to come out, or once we have phase 2. I think it's like something like that. If it's directly like a week after, 2 weeks after, then obviously that's better, but I do think they will have a bit of time to implement that. But the removal of the buff and debuff limit is directly online, and also instant mail between characters on the same account. And that is going to be live on launch. And this video, I'm not going to say and read out loud what the blue post is without giving you a few examples on the dual specs and how big it is for every single class, but also the removal of the buff and debuff limit and who has the most benefits towards that. Now, a big thing, I've made an Excel sheet here so it's easier to have some visualization towards the specs. First and foremost, if you are a main tank and you want to do DPS, you could do main tank DPS. Or you could say main tank and PvP spec. You can do maybe an off tank spec even. You could even do a arm spec, you can do a fury two-hander spec, you could do a fury tank spec. You have multiple like ways to go for it. If you have a dual spec, you could pretty much do that. Or every single DPS that is like fury spec for PvE and they are looking forward to do PvP with a two-hander, they finally got a second spec to play like that, which is super big because then you don't have to spend that much gold towards respecs. Again, in my guild, all warriors had like 50 golds respec because they were keeping on respecing every single time after a raid. They would do PvP, and every time they're done with PvP and they're going to do the next week's raid, for example, next week's MC, they would then respec into their DPS spec because they didn't want to perform badly. Because again, we wanted to perform well as a semi-hardcore guild. Again, it was not very hardcore because I was a boomy in that guild, but still they wanted to perform, which is like needed to have a good spec for that. And now they could like do that without spending gold, which is very big. Now for paladin, how big it is. Again, if you want to play retribution paladin, that's your die-hard spec, you can still have a retribution paladin spec, but as a raiding spec you would heal as a holy paladin. And the gear that you would have from, like, for example, tier 2 from PWL, you can even use it as a retribution paladin set. So you have a lot of like items that are usable for retribution paladins that you would get as a holy paladin, so you will have benefits from that. And obviously once you're done with raiding and you have, let's say, a 200 drop from MC or BWL, you could literally go into PvP and have fun as a retribution paladin. Or you could also have a holy paladin spec and also a prot paladin, or like a AoE spec, for example, AoE spec for grinding gold. You could do that, and that's not a problem. You could easily have that now with dual spec. How big is it for warlock? Now the issue with, it's not really an issue, it is not that big of a problem for warlock, because SM Ruin was a good spec, is a good spec for PvP, and is also a good spec for raiding. But you could also have a dual spec, which is, for example, DS Rune, if I'm not mistaken. DS Rune is the raiding spec that you could also have, where you would sacrifice, let's say, your succubus to get more shadow damage. You could easily do that. And then obviously with the debuff limit, you could also put a corruption, and even an agony, not agony, because then you will not put a agony, but you would put a corruption and you could then spam shadow bolts, and you would not lose damage, you would actually gain damage from that. So in longer fights. Now in shorter fights, I think maybe putting a shadow bolt extra is probably better, but because of a GCD. But it depends. Like that is for the theory crafters, for you guys. If you want to theory craft, how big it is to get like the debuff limit gone, I do believe that there is a world where they would benefit. You could also say, look, I want to maybe have like a pure PvP spec, which is like deep distro, for example, which is basically conflag. You could have that, and then again, the dual spec will enable you to not respec every single time you want to play a different flavor of warlock. Personally, whenever I played warlock, I prefer to play SM Rune, and I had to respec to get like deep distro if I wanted to play with conflag. I had like 37 points into distro if I'm not mistaken, and it was a fun spec to play. And then you have shaman, which I think is one of the best benefits out there. You could play resto shaman in raiding, and then in PvP you could go elemental shaman. So with 31 points like this, you could easily play like this, or you could have like I think up to 10 points into enhanced, and then another 10 points into resto. You have multiple spec that you can play, and that is basically you being able to, to be enabled into doing PvP, but also being good into raiding. But you could also say, look, I want to play enhancement shaman, like for example Retribution Pod would do, and that's also a huge benefit, because then again you don't need to spend any gold. Or you could say, look, I want to play two builds of shamans, because you have two builds as a shaman. You have 31 10 10 for example, or 31 7 13. You have multiple ones. So let's say we do like this. So I think with Ghost Wolf, I think it's 7. You need 7 points for Ghost Wolf if I'm not mistaken. You could do that, or you could also say, look, I want to maybe play like this with Nature Swiftness. So you could have like a big heal possible in PvP. So you have the defensive build, or you can play a more PvP centric, more a burst centric with Elemental Mastery. So you have multiple things that you can go for, which I think is a huge win. Again, for the multiple people that want to play like a bit of a different style of class or spec, you could literally do that with dual spec. And some people are mad because of dual spec in classic. I'm personally very happy about it, because it means that gold is not going to be spent on respec, but it's going to be spent on consumes, which again is going to give more reasons for people to perform in raids. Again, I'm not a hardcore raider. I don't think I will ever be, but I'd like to get my consumes up to get like as possible, like as but much possibility to perform in those raids. And then again, Druid, one of my classes in 2019, which I would have liked to have dual spec. You could literally play Moonglow spec, you could play the Flag Carrier spec. You have also a Heart of the Wild spec. You have also Deep Feral that you could play. You have also like a spec like this, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that. You have some sort of spec that is like combining multiple like hybrid spec, you could call. There is also a spec like this, I think with a bit more points into Feral, if I'm not mistaken, and I think a bit more into I'm not really sure about that, because it was a while ago, something like that. You have multiple builds that you can play. You can also play full Boomy. You can go like I think it was 37 points into Boomy, and then you had like 0 points into Feral. Actually, you could do that. You could do like this, right? There are a few builds that you can play, and you can play around with 2 or 3 points, if I'm not mistaken, towards the resto side. You could also have more points into the bear form, not bear form, but like cat form. So you could have like movement speed. Again, you have multiple builds that you can play around, and are very fun as a druid, and that is a huge game changer. Again, druids are not really good at like really farming gold. I at least I didn't have like the possibility to farm gold as a druid. I did it on my hunter, and that would be like great. I could have a Flag Carrier build, and then also like a resto or a feral or a boomy raiding build. So I could do that, or I could also say, look, I want to play boomy in my PvP days, and whenever I'm like raiding, I'm playing resto druid. There are multiple things that are like in play, and I think that it is one of the biggest things for druids, which I think is the most like hybrid sensitive class out there, because you have like literally 3 builds that are vastly different, like, first and foremost, and then you have like sub builds that are more towards flag carrying or more towards raiding. Like again, Deep Feral you could play without like the speed on your cat form because it doesn't really matter, for example. While in open world PvP, you would like to have 30% more speed on your cat form, which is like mandatory in a lot of ways. For example, here Priest, I think you could literally say I want to play SP and then I want to play deep Disc Priest, for example, for 31 points for like a power infusion. You have multiple ways that you can play your spec class based on purely your dual spec, so you don't need to respec anymore. You can say, look, I want to raid as a disc, but in my free time I want to play Shadow Priest. I think that's cool. Like again, not being able to have to respec a lot does like give you more incentives to play into raiding and play into PvP and just play vanilla. Maybe you would not have played vanilla if there was no dual spec. Same for rogue, you have a PvE rogue spec. For example, for combat you could go for, or you can have a sword spec, and you could also have like a dagger spec with ambush, for example. You have multiple specs that you can play, although I think rogues are also sensitive to that. They still have some farms, so again, it's not as important. Hunter have also a lot of like great things. For example, Hunter, you have like a BM spec if you want to play. You could also play Deep Survival, or you can play MM. You could also play like Deep MM. You could also say, look, I want to play like a hybrid of MM, Survival and BM. Like for example with Traps, I want to play with a lot of Traps activations without like having to respec every single time, because in PvP it's very strong, but in PvE raiding you don't really need Traps as much, because a lot of like mobs or bosses are just immuning that. It is like very big, and I'm very satisfied about that. And as a dual spec, again, Hunter is going to help a lot, because if you want to play BM, like it kind of sucks to like respec for it, because it doesn't matter in raiding and it is not optimal in PvP, so you never really play BM except for leveling, and that is going to be quite big. Again, I think like the dual spec is going to be around 50 gold, so it's an investment, but once you have done that, you don't need to change too many times your specs. And then mage, very easy. You have an AoE spec, which is also usable for in raiding if you have packs. And then if you have like boss fights, you could like swap specs into like a single target build. You could do that, or you could say, look, in PvP I want to play Pompyro. Like I want to play Pompyro. I don't want to like. Again, I cannot raid with that, but I want to have fun in AB, like literally with levitate, like not levitate, but like slow fall, and then Pompyro someone while I'm doing that, like in do PvP montage video. And you could also play like just Deep Frost, for example. You have multiple ways you can play, and that is something very exciting. And then if I'm talking about like, let's say I'm talking about how big are the changes towards the debuff and buff changes, I would say the huge benefits are like druids. Obviously, you're going to be able to pre-rejuve everyone without like making someone lose a buff, because there is a limit to buffs. Now it's gone, so that's going to be pretty big. Pre-rejuve everyone, drink a bit, and then go for a fight, for example. And that HPS at the start of a fight is very big. So I did that at the start in MC whenever I was with my semi-hardcore guild. But I again, they told me at one point to say, look, we're going to have more buffs soon, because we're going to add like an extra class that has a buff, and so you need to stop doing rejuves. At that point, I said, okay, no problem, I'm not going to do rejuves. And then just it was about healing touch, like healing touch rank 4, if I'm not mistaken, and then max healing touch. It makes it very fun. Also, if you're a boomy, you could like literally do moonfire as well. It's not very effective, but it's still there. It's extra damage and it's sticking, and for faster fights, why not? You could then do a starfire moonfire without making like a debuff fall down, or like an important debuff not being applied onto the boss, for example. Warlocks are a big winner into that. That is going to be massive for warlocks. Shadow Priest is going to be a very big winner, although they still are going to get you have obviously, I would say Feral Druids is not really a winner, because you're not raking or ripping, because it is not really scaling well in late game. Usually it's not that good because it does, like, the damage is not scaling well. If it was scaling like in SOD, it would be like fantastic. Unfortunately, it is not the case. I think Shaman, Enhancement Shaman, is going to have a big benefit because then they are able to do Storm Strike, which is going to improve the next nature damage spells. If I'm not mistaken, this may be applied towards your party members. I don't really know. It might be like, again, I don't play Horde. I don't know about that. But if it applies to party members, it's actually a very big benefit towards the raid. If you're like playing with like a again, it depends on raids because it could immune, but you could play around your elemental shaman, or you could play maybe around your boomy. It could do more damage. I don't know, man. That's something for the theory crafters that are playing Horde. I'm playing Alliance, so I don't really know too much about it, unfortunately. I might play Horde this time. I don't know. I'm still like deciding about that. Rogues, I don't know. Rupture is not that good, unfortunately. You could like maybe have a poisons, but even then, is it going to be a benefit for Rogue? I actually don't know. Because they're like, again, for example, for Horde, you don't want to have poisons if I'm not mistaken, because you want to have Wind Fury. So, but for Alliance, it could be beneficial towards rogues, maybe. I don't know, depending on the poisons and how, maybe deadly poison. I don't know how big it is. I don't think it's that big, but if it's big, let me know. Hunter, they might have like a sting, like serpent sting. That could be quite good in longer fights. In shorter fights, I don't know if it's really benefiting the GCD. But again, you could like literally do while you're auto-shotting, so you're not losing a auto-shot. Like, again, you could do that while you are waiting for your auto-shot. If you have like, you have a specific timing where you could do a serpent stick without losing a GCD for your multi-shot or aim shot. So there is a possibility there. Although, again, if I'm melee weaving, there is not a lot of possibilities to do a serpent sting. And then you have mage, which I think doesn't really benefit too much about that. But overall, I think, and also weapons, you have some weapons that have like a proc that you would not use because you don't want to have the proc being procced. That could be also big. For example, for warriors and whatnot, you could then start using those weapons while raiding. That could be beneficial. All in all, I think it's a huge benefit to have those like changes into Classic. I'm very excited about that. Again, it's a long video for not only dual spec. Again, some people might probably type it, but like I tried to give you some example on how big it is for every single class and giving you some ideas, and maybe it would even like make you hesitate about what class you're going to main in Fresh Classic, because again, you could say, look, I wanted to play actually like warlock because I thought like it would be comfy to only have one spec that is good for PvP and PvE. Or you could say, look, I want to play maybe retribution paladin, but I'm hesitating. I don't want to like have to respec every single time to get benefit from like being able to raid as a holy paladin while your retribution paladin spec. So with the dual spec, you could maybe say in Recall Standard, like, oh, Paladin is maybe something for you. So I'm very, very excited about that. Again, thank you for watching. Thank you to Blizzard to have listened to that. I do feel like, again, I'm very jealous because I'm also a retail player. And on retail, we don't get listened as much as Classic. And that's true. I think Classic devs are fantastic at everything they're trying to do. I think SOD is just a bit of a fail. It has nothing to do with the devs. It has to do with how the implementation has not been like super like great. And the ideas might be super good on a whiteboard or a blackboard. But it is at the end not maybe a good idea like overall once it's implemented. But I think they do a fantastic job. I have a lot of like faith towards Classic devs, and they're doing only W's right now. So bravo to you guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you for everything. 3 days, man. 3 days and we have Fresh. I'm excited about it. Again, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Bye.